touch in a very small way let me just enter a taste of the traditional Zen lineage. I want to say, to begin with, is last night we did the homage to the Buddhist mothers ceremony at Everyday Zen, just as we had done here, although just a little different. And it was just equally beautiful. It's a really beautiful ceremony. I have to admit, there's some part of me that when I look at it, I think, and then you do this, and then you do that, and is this going to work? And is this going to, and then it's everybody just drops into it, and something happens that's bigger than the sum of the parts. And we again dedicated it to Carolyn Meister, who died at Tassajara. And I this morning I wrote to Paula Arai because I had told her we were going to do these ceremonies, and she had even asked if she see if her schedule allowed her to come, which it didn't. But I wrote to her and said that we did the ceremony here and we did it at Everyday Zen, and she responded right away. Thank you for sharing. Tears flowing. Carolyn, one bright pearl, may we continue to liberate our compassion. Really, she's a deeply wise and feeling human being and practitioner and woman. So on Tuesday, I talked a fair amount about the traditional lineage and the stories in, it's called Transmission of the Light. This one is Zen in the Art of Enlightenment by Zen Master Keizan. That's the way it's titled. The one that I was able to put on the website and the newsletter is a translation by Cook. This is a translation by Cleary. So I think I'm going to repeat just a little bit of, I like the introduction of the Cook one. So just a little bit. He talks about this, the Denkyo Ryoku, being a spiritual genealogy. Like in your family, it's and then this person was born and that person was born, and in this one, it's a spiritual genealogy of how the teachings were passed across time. And Keizan was the one who compiled this. So Keizan took it as his task to trace the genealogy of the Soto line of Zen Buddhism, which was his family. The founding ancestor to which Keizan's line is heir was the Buddha Shakyamuni, Shakyamuni Buddha. That's where our lineage begins, who passed on his spiritual endowment and authority to his own spiritual, says here son, Mahakashapa, who in turn passed it on to his own spiritual progeny, Ananda, and so on through 28 generations in India, 22 generations in China, and 2 generations in Japan, ending with Zen Master Koan Eijo, the 52nd patriarch of the family. In the process of recording these generations, Keizan discusses the spiritual struggles and victories of such well-known figures in Buddhist history, such as Mahakashapa, Ananda, Ashvaghosha, Vasubandhu, Bodhidharma, Huike, Quinyan, Dongshan, and Dogen, along with a number of others in the Indian line who were unknown outside of Buddhist genealogies of this kind. Thus, and this is the story and the myth of our tradition, this record shows a straight and unbroken line of descent starting from the Buddha and continuing through India, China, and Japan, and ending with Eijo. And of course, it's continued and continued and continued and continued down to Suzuki Roshi, who passed it to, in this lineage, in our lineage, to Mel Weissman, to Norman Fisher, who passed it to me, who and on and on. So it's a living, breathing lineage. But this is like if you wanted to go back and talk about great grandma and grandpa and how it all began. And you also know that think I said on Tuesday, my nephew was visiting and we had a little family dinner. And he wanted to know about family history. Because he realizes this generation, my generation, is also going to die, and where are all these stories going to go? And I mean, it's so fascinating when you sit at the table. Everybody has a different interpretation of what happened. You know, my sister's 2 years younger than me, and I have a sister who's 8 years younger than me, and the views are similar but different because causes and conditions were different. So the stories that get passed to us are a kind of myth, and they're helpful because they bring forward some heart quality of what it is that we're doing here. So Cook, in his introduction, explains that in the traditional stories, the first part is a koan, little koan that's offered. The second part is then a little story about the koan. The third part is then Keizan's commentary, speaking from the heart, the teacher speaking from the heart. So what's this have to do with us and with this practice, and what are we really doing here? And then there's a short capping verse. So that goes through all these generations, and that's what this book is. He says there are two main topics. I'll find in a minute. I thought I marked. Can't find it, so I'll tell you what I remember. Is the two main things is one, practice. Practice, it's zazen. It's practice in your everyday life. And that there is training. There's a deep commitment to practice, and there is training, which we do in our own kind of Zen light way here, and which we do at all day sits. And if you go into a monastery, that's when you go into a monastery. And if you're going to be one of the holders of the lineage, that's part of your responsibility, is to really understand that it's like, where and how do you bow, and what is this Zen stuff that we do here. For most of us, that doesn't matter so much. What matters is the heart of it. And so we can do the forms in a way that's light and helps to hold us in a, hopefully in a way that anybody can enter. Anybody can enter a monastery, but that's a whole other commitment and obligation. He also mentions in here, and I said this on Tuesday, which I think is really beautiful. It's called transmission of the light. So what is this light that is being transmitted? And he says the light is like a pearl. Remember one bright pearl? It's like a pearl that is bright and lustrous without need for carving and polishing. So one bright pearl is the truth of our true nature and who we each are and what the whole world is and how to bring it forward. So I thought, but I want to do this. Oh, do I want to? I thought I'd read you the first chapter about Shakyamuni. Well, we were going to do the chant. Oh, let's do the. So, so if you've been to San Francisco Zen Center, if you've been to Tassajara, if you're going to go to Tassajara this summer with for Sangha Week, there is, and you go to services, there is a traditional chant that on a regular basis, you chant the lineage. You acknowledge this lineage. It's now within my lifetime, which is our lifetime, we now also chant a chant of the women ancestors, which is finally and important. So Debbie and I aren't going to do the whole thing because you can see, well, maybe you can't see, but we'll scroll down. But Debbie, let's just do the first a few lines just so you can get a sense of it. And if you've been there and you know it, you could chant along wherever you are. Names of the Buddhas and ancestors. Butsudaya Sho, Shikui Butsudaya Sho, Ishaku Butsudaya Sho, Kurasan Butsudaya Sho, Kunagon Muni Butsudaya Sho, Kasho Butsudaya Sho, Shakyamuni Butsudaya Sho, Makakasho Daya Sho, Ananda Daya Sho, Shonawashi Daya Sho, Ubakituta Daya Sho, Dai Takadaya Sho, Nishakadaya Sho, Nishvashimitsu Daya Sho, Butsanandai Daya Sho, Buddhamita Daya Sho, Vasashiva Daya Sho, Funayasha Daya Sho, Anabote Daya Sho, Kabimara Daya Sho, Nagyahara Huna Daya Sho, Kanadaiba Daya Sho, Ragarata Daya Sho, Sogyanandai Daya Sho, Kaya Shata Daya Sho, Kumarata Daya Sho, Shayata Daya Sho, Vashibantu Daya Sho, Manura Daya Sho, Kakarakuna Daya Sho. Why don't you scroll all the way down so I can see how many?
I'm completely lost. Yeah, I lost my place too.
Well, that's what happens. And I have to say that the reason I can do this is because I lived in a monastery for 8 years. And you do these chants and it's amazing. I couldn't do these by myself, most of them. I need the script, but also if I get with other people who know them, my whole body remembers. It's just fascinating how you just know where the bell, it's like what doaning, when you learn how to be a doan, you'll just see how much you know from being at services. So I actually was having fun doing that, remembering it, and it gives you a taste. And again, if you come to Tassajara and you're in the service, that will be there, but you don't have to know it. You can just open your heart and feel that it's a story. It's a story about, let's take this down off the screen. It's a story about generation after generation of human beings, men and women. And I hope at the end there's a new book out, Transcending Trans-Buddhist Voices, because of course, we in the way we cognize in dualities and binaries and men and women, it just feels important in this time, although it's not recognized in the lineage. There's the full spectrum gender fluidity. Of course it's always been there. Of course it's always been there. So I thought maybe I would just read you a few words from that. But it's past. It's passed from warm hand to warm hand, warm heart to warm heart, of just people who love the Dharma, who love the teachings of the Buddha, and in the most fundamental way, love and know the light as a metaphor or the finger pointing at the moon to the essence of everything. It's deep interconnection, deep interpenetration, deep form and emptiness flashing in and out of vast time and space, and just completely transmitted between person to person in each moment. So you ready to hear about the story about Shakyamuni Buddha? Okay, you're going to get it anyway, sorry. We'll see. I think this is a beautiful one. Some are longer than others. Chapter 1. Shakyamuni Buddha. Here's the koan. Shakyamuni Buddha realized enlightenment on seeing the morning star. He said, I and all beings on earth together attain enlightenment at the same time. Say it again. I and all beings on earth together attain enlightenment at the same time. Is that? Then he goes on to tell the story. Excuse me, I was up late last night driving in the rain, coming home. I think I'm still waking up. Shakyamuni left his palace one night when he was 19 years old and shaved off his hair. After that, he spent 6 years practicing ascetic exercises. Subsequently, he sat on an indestructible seat, so immobile that there were cobwebs in his brows, a bird's nest on his head, and reeds growing up through his mat. And thus he sat for 6 years. A great story. That just like bring up images of sitting. On his 30th year, on the eligibility day of the 12th month, he was suddenly enlightened when the morning star appeared. And then he spoke the foregoing words, his first lion's roar. After that, he spent 49 years helping others by teaching, never staying in seclusion. With just one robe and one bowl, he lacked nothing. He taught at over 360 assemblies and then finally entrusted the treasury of the eye of truth to Kashapa. That was the first transmission in the way these stories are told. And its transmission has continued to the present. Indeed, this is the root of the transmission and practice of the true teaching in India, China, and Japan. The behavior of Shakyamuni Buddha during his lifetime is a model for the disciples he left behind. That's us. Even though he may have had the 32 special marks of greatness and the 80 kinds of refinements, this refers to all this stuff as like the Buddha had certain kinds of ears and all these marks that you would identify a Buddha. So if you go to a museum, you would be able to see the 32 marks in a lot of the sculptures. Even though he had all those marks, he kept the form of an old mendicant, no different from anyone else. So he was a Buddha, but completely a human being. Therefore, ever since he was in the world, through the 3 periods of his teaching, genuine, imitation, and derelict, those who have sought the way of his teachings have imitated the Buddha's forms and manners, have used the endowment of the Buddha, and in all their doings have always considered the task of self-understanding foremost, waking up to the self. Freedom is waking up to the self. Of course we have a self. And how can we be in relationship to it where we just don't keep getting hooked in the same meanness and self-centeredness and to keep sitting down with and for all beings? You're hearing with this is fun for me to read this out loud, is all the teachings are in this. I mean, you could just take this one thing and it's all being offered. Having been transmitted from Buddha to Buddha, from adept to adept, the true teaching has never been cut off. This story clearly points to this. Even though what the Buddha pointed out and explained in the more than 360 meetings over 49 years was not the same, the various stories, parables, metaphors, and explanations did not go beyond the principle illustrated in the story of his enlightenment. That is to say, Bree said I, in that first column, I and all beings. I is not Shakyamuni Buddha. Even Shakyamuni Buddha comes from this I. And it does not only give birth to Shakyamuni Buddha, all beings on earth also come from here. Just as when you lift up a net, all the holes are raised, in the same way when Shakyamuni Buddha was enlightened or woke up, so too were all beings on earth enlightened. What is this I that includes all beings and each moment? So that as we wake up, everything wakes up with us. And as you wake up, everything wakes up with you. How deep this net of interconnection is. And you can't cognize it. You have to know this through practice. And it was not only beings on earth that were enlightened, all the Buddhas of past, present, and future also attained enlightenment. So we're already here, you might have noticed, in something like the Lotus Sutra, where it's just asking you to go beyond and beyond and beyond anything you can imagine, because that's just the truth of each moment. Beginningless, no beginning, no end, vast time and space. And it is completely this I that awakens everyone and everything. You completely lost?
No.
Okay, good. Well, this is so. Do not think of Shakyamuni Buddha as having become enlightened. Isn't this great? It's like Dogen. The minute you pick up one thing and you think, well, maybe I've got something to hang on here, it just don't think that's it either. Do not see Shakyamuni Buddha outside of all the beings on earth. You want to see Shakyamuni Buddha? Just each moment. Look at the birds and the bees and the forest and the however immensely diverse the mountains, rivers, lands, and all forms and appearances may be, all of them are the eye of the Buddha. And you too are standing in the eye of the Buddha. And it is not simply that you are standing there. The eye has become you. Buddha's eye has become everyone's whole body, each standing tall. Isn't that a great story? It's you. Therefore, this clear, bright eye that spans all time should not be thought of as people evidently hear. You are Buddha's eye. Can you see through Buddha's eye? The entire body is hands and eyes. This me, I, what is this eye of the true treasury of the Dharma eye that sees and perceives in this way? Are you enlightened with the Buddha? If you say you become enlightened with the Buddha, or you say the Buddha becomes enlightened with you, that is not the Buddha's enlightenment at all. Therefore, it should not be called the principle of enlightenment. Even so, I'm going to pull the rug out again. I and together are neither one or two. Your skin, flesh, bones, and marrow are all together. And the host inside the house is I. True nature, essence of everything is skin, flesh, bones, and marrow. It is everything. It does not have skin, flesh, bones, and marrow. It does not have gross physical or mental elements. Ultimately speaking, if you want to know the undying person in the hut, remember when we studied the grass hut? How could it be apart from this skin bag? I love that phrase, that this body is an old skin bag. The older I get, the more that just seems, that delights me. So you should not understand the beings on earth. So you should not understand the beings on earth as distinct from yourself. A little bit more here. While the seasons come and go, and the mountains, rivers, and land change with the times, you should know that this is Buddha raising his eyebrows and blinking his eyes. So it is the unique body revealed in myriad forms. It is effacing myriad forms and not effacing myriad forms. The ancient master Fei Yun said, "What effacing or not effacing can you talk about?" And Daizhong said, "What do you call myriad forms?" So, studying from all angles. Turn it, keep being turned by it. To me, it's like a multifaceted jewel or diamond, and you think, and you're looking in one view, and then it changes and moves, or the sunlight changes or penetrates it. It's just the truth of the way everything is it's shimmering, formless form. And we think we got it for a minute, and then it'll change into something else, which is what enlightenment or living with the light or awakening or waking up is the capacity to be here, present with wonder and kindness and joy in this completely ephemeral material world that isn't material at all. So studying from all angles, penetrating in all ways, you should clarify Buddha's enlightenment and understand your own enlightenment. I want you all to see this story closely and be able to explain it, letting the explanation flow from your own heart, not borrowing the words of another. Which is to say, find out what this means in your own deep heart and live it moment after moment. This is just a story to help. The transmission and the lineage, they're all just stories. The point is, wake up. What's the truth of being alive? What's the truth of alive? So here's the final closing statement. I also want to add a humble saying to this story. One branch stands out on the old apricot tree. Thorns come forth at the same time. One branch stands out on the old apricot tree. Thorns come forth at the same time. Maybe we could say, one branch is our life. And amazingly, problems come forth at the same time. Everything is expressing Buddha's awakening. Buddha's awakening, our awakening, is happening each moment. Pay attention, you can't go wrong. I think that's a cool story. It's a really beautiful way to imagine what we're doing here. And for me, I think the feeling always has been nothing ever felt big enough. No explanation ever felt big enough. And these turnings feel like there's no end to this. This is forever awakening. And forever awakening is forever coming into relationship, which means coming into kindness, which means coming into love, which means more and more seeing clearly, which is there's no separation. And then how do we live that in this political climate and in the me and you, and I like it and I don't like it. That's the work of it. So let me, and of course it's coming, I mean, there was just a whole new edition of, I think it was Tricycle, or maybe it was Lion's Roar, with everything written by people of color, which just wouldn't have happened 20 years ago, maybe even 10 years ago. You know, things just change. And we also know it takes a long time for things to change. So also to have a book of trans Buddhist voices be published in the last couple of years it's just going to keep, Buddhism isn't some stayed, dried, this is it, and now you fit into it. It just is big enough to include everything. So I thought I would just read you something really briefly. Fresh Lev White, I think he's at the East Bay Meditation Center. It's called Blessing Our Bodhisattva Awakening. As the Buddha has offered us the precepts and the Eightfold Path, and we embrace the three gems, for those of us who recognize gender as a social construct, not truth. Those of us who understand the body is not to be clung to like an ultimate us, but instead to be used on our path to live in authenticity, in truth, on our path to freedom, even as the suffering of the world continues to be revealed. May we choose to be open to and to cultivate for ourselves and others metta, compassion, and humility. And then may all beings be safe and happy and feel loved. May you have all you need on this path. May you be free. May all beings awaken to the life of their true selves. May love and peace radiate over the entire world and beyond. It's exactly what's here. It's coming through a particular person at a particular time. So maybe how about if